everybody for joining us again here at Startup Grind Houston. I'm so excited to be doing something really different. As you guys know me, I'm all about experimenting and testing out new things. How else can we innovate if we don't do that? That's what makes us entrepreneurs, right? And so, our three values have really been a huge guide for us these past 10 years, because 10 years will be our anniversary this summer. And I always like repeating them because that's a way to reconnect with that message. And so, one, it's about making friends, not contacts. Two, it's about giving and not taking. And three, it's about helping others before you help yourself. What better foundation for us to create for our conversation today with Karthik Soora, who is running for state senate here in Texas. And yes, we've never had a fireside chat with someone who's running for office, but we're doing it now. So welcome, Karthik.
Thanks so much, Michelle, for having me. It really means a lot.
Well, one of the things that I'm finding is that people's minds literally are transforming, and they're being more open about what they're willing to talk about now. Doesn't mean that there aren't detractors or haters of people who are actually still in a place of wound, trauma, and react. But I'm finding that people are finding their voice in a really different way since we've gone through the pandemic. So I'm really excited for the values that you put on your website and the things that you're running for. I don't have all of them written down. I'm going to ask questions about three of them today, but I will put in the event description, obviously the link. And if I have your permission, I'd like to list all of the things that you're running for, because there's a good handful there and they're really needed.
No, thank you so much. Definitely have my permission. And we need to add even more as we're talking with everybody in a conversation.
Ooh, see, now you're starting to remind me of what we need from people who are representing us, and that is a willingness to not just listen, but add it to what they're going to do when you hear it's important to the people. All right, so let's start with our first question that I think really caught my attention when I was looking at your website, and that is, you talk about unrigging the system. So how does unrigging the system benefit and serve entrepreneurs or startups?
That's a great question. And so a little bit about me, y'all. I have actually a startup experience. And so Michelle and I actually met at the Bayou Startup Showcase, I believe, back in the day at Rice University's Allspark Startup Accelerator. And so I started off in an ed tech social venture. Unfortunately, we weren't able to scale to the extent that we wanted, but it still exists as a nonprofit. And so I think when we look at Texas, we are the 8th largest economy in the world, right? Like T with for like trillions. And so we are doing a lot of things right? We're attracting people from all over the nation internationally. We have a very, very favorable business climate in a great extent. But I do think that we can be a lot better, right? And I think when we talk about unrigging the system, what I'm specifically referring to is the fact that our campaign finance system is essentially the Wild West, where it is legal for a billionaire to donate an unlimited amount of money into a race, right? And when you think about the procurement power of like the hundreds of billions of dollars of the Texas state government, and a lot of startups are going to be wanting to try and, work with different counties, work with different cities, work with different state governments. And yes, there's procurement rules, but when you have a system where it's basically very, very difficult to have transparency because the super wealthy can write the rules and incumbent players, that stops innovation and it stops disruption from happening. And so then that increases costs for consumers, and it also creates barriers for entrepreneurs. And I think that, like, I talk with a bunch of different entrepreneurs and people say, like, look, it's just really, I didn't get into this because I wanted to play political games. I came into this because I wanted to create a product that was amazing, that could lower costs for folks and really help consumers or businesses in the industry. And we need to just, my sort of thoughts are, we need to get rid of gerrymandering. We need to get rid of set like very firm campaign finance limits and that kind of stuff, and just be very, very conscious in terms of how we're policing all this stuff by strengthening the Texas Ethics Commission. And then that's going to make a lot of entrepreneurs feel powerful in their ability to challenge incumbent players. And I think unrigging the system will let a ton more folks who've never been part of the economy in the startup way feel like, yes, I too can enter this and be the next, Bill Gates, so to speak, whatever you want to be. And that's what the state should be doing.
Well, thank you for that. So when we think about how we navigate and how we problem solve, you put something really succinctly and so perfectly said on your website. And so I'm just going to repeat it as is in a question form.
Go for it.
What do you mean by we cannot solve 21st century problems with 19th century political system?
Yeah, and I think like one of the more unique things about me is like as somebody who worked in a startup, I was always thinking, okay, version 1.0, how do we iterate to version 1.5, version 2.0, et cetera, right? And our government should be responsive like that. To its credit, at the state like government level, I have seen a lot of like digital innovation in terms of making it really easy to get like my driver's license, for example, right? But we have a system right now, like if you're an entrepreneur or if you're trying to open up factories in Texas, we have a grid that is increasingly unreliable. And I think ERCOT itself has put out estimates for the winter and says there's a 20% scenario and 20% chance of a scenario where Winter Storm Uri kind of repeats itself or something even worse, right? And I think that everybody from the farthest left to the farthest right agree that the system as it is isn't working. And like when we talk about markets, we have lots and lots of different opportunities. So maybe let me think of it this way, right? Like in terms of a startup ecosystem, or if you're a consumer and I go to like a Kroger or a Sam's and like I want Oreos, and people are like, no, you don't get Oreos, you only get Twinkies or bleach, right? Sometimes I might say, okay, fine, I want Twinkies. But sometimes I might just say, no, I don't want Twinkies. I wanted Oreos. I'm just going to stay home because I'm sick of that. And so I think that a lot of in 2024, millennials and Gen Z will make up 47 to 48%, almost half of this entire state's voting eligible population. And a lot of people feel like they don't have choices, and we have the same political system that keeps working again and again, where special interests have too much power and where they are always forced to just have two choices. And so I think, for example, like let's say you're voting in your municipal elections, you have to vote first for the city council, and then you have to vote in a runoff. We should be thinking about things like ranked choice voting, so you can have a multiple sets of options and then have one election that would save everybody money and give you all more choices, because I think Texans deserve more choice and more voice. I also think when you look at other states, and there's like 30 other states that 20 to 30 other states that do this, citizens are able to take their ideas and put them to the public and get these ideas passed, right? That's how states have gotten rid of gerrymandering. That's how states have passed ethics laws. That's how states have been able to say, we want to get our citizens health care through things like Medicaid expansion. And so 109 years ago, Texans passed Prop 1, which passed the House and the Senate, and which would have let any citizen be able to take their ideas and put them to the general public. Unfortunately, it only failed by 3%. But in those 109 years, Texas has changed a lot. And I think one of the 21st century solutions to a system that we need to have are things like citizen-led ballot initiatives. So we could put, let's say, Roe v. Wade on the ballot if people wanted to, or universal gun background checks, or heck, if people want to vastly increase the funding for innovation in terms of startup accelerators, incubators, they could do that as well. And it just shouldn't be the case that people in Austin have all of the power as opposed to the people having more power. And so I think when I talk about 21st century problems and I look at the grid, our lack of healthcare, the fact that there's just so much gun violence. I think that we need to change our political system, and forces like entrepreneurship, and for people like, so people have to rapidly iterate in the startup world to understand how to go from 1.0 to 2.0, but our system has remained the same for over 150 years, and it's just still a good old boys club. And I grew up in Arkansas. I'm in Texas now. I definitely enjoy hanging out with some good old boys, but we need to make sure we can have systems that allow for everybody to be at the table. Like, we don't even have online voter registration in Texas, right? Like, if you can pay your property taxes online, I don't understand why we can't vote online. It's not vote online, sorry, register to vote online. And so I think these are those common sense ideas, citizen-led ballot initiatives, getting big money out of politics, considering things like ranked choice voting, that I think every Texan wants to see in a new political system that works for everybody.
You brought up something really interesting, and that's the dynamic of generations and how that is finally coming to a volume or a margin that can really make a difference in what happens. And so, while it wasn't one of the three questions, you brought it up, and it's top of mind to me. And I'm sitting here going, the biggest thing that I hear whenever I talk to millennials and Gen Z is that they feel like the system is so warped that their vote doesn't matter. So my question is, do you think by the fact that you're running, so you are a younger face, mind, and stand for change that they feel is more supportive of the world they want to live in, do you think that's going to make a difference? And how can we get more people to run for office that aren't 60 plus? And I'll hold my hand up for anybody who wants to say anything snarky. I'm 64 and I talk about ageism all the time and how it's wrong. That's not what I'm speaking to here. I'm speaking to more involvement from all generations, not just a select few. So now that qualifier is out there, how can we get more people involved, Karthik?
Yeah, I think that it's very complicated, because I think a lot of people in our generations do feel disillusioned, and millennials and Gen Z in particular. And I think that comes with, we need to really have politicians who can present ideas in new ways, and that come from non-traditional communities, right? I'm a teacher. I'm a person who did a social venture as a startup founder, and I think that I can definitely and I would also be the first minority to ever represent the 70% majority minority district, as well as the first Asian American. Obviously, these are not all the factors why I'm running, right? I'd also be the first in clean energy. But I think that people in this great state deserve to have representation that comes from their communities, and it comes from all sorts of different communities. And I also think that everyone in all of these communities, wherever I go, people agree that the system isn't working in a lot of ways. And, BU from the silent generation and BU from Gen Z, I just want, I think, perspective about what the system can look like and what the future can look like is not something, it correlates with age, but it's not determinative of it, right? Because I think you are very open to lots of new ideas. And I've definitely met some Gen Z folks who startle me with with their uninterest in reform sometimes. And so the answer is that these ideas, I think, there's that quote, right? There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And I think that in Texas, a lot of people are thinking that we need change at a big level in terms of getting rid of corruption, in terms of it should not be the case that what we saw with sorry to make it more political, but I just thought the impeachment of Paxton and the circumstances, I just thought that level of brazen corruption with a billionaire putting his hands on the stakes and saying if you don't vote this way, we're going to make you pay these consequences, was really disappointing, both in terms of a system that we think is fair in terms of justice, but also in terms of one business wise, where it seems like justice itself is corrupted by big money. And so I think that there is a movement of Texans that are saying across ages, across races, across parties, that we need bigger change And I'm excited to see how that emerges. And I want to also say, there's a lot of people that have helped me and provided me opportunities. And I think the only thing you can do in terms of those values that you were talking about, right, is pay it forward to folks and make sure that you are in it to be altruistic, and what goes around comes around in a good way. So thank you for the efforts that you've done to put light on a lot of folks that are doing interesting things.
Yeah. Well, out of, I think, how many values do you guys have listed on the website? I forgot to count.
I think we have like 10-ish policy issues right now.
Okay.
I think we're going to be adding in 2 to 3 more. I think generative AI offers a lot of challenges, and in terms of like our social model and how we should be really thinking both about how startups can be taking off, but also the job dynamics, right? And I think that's definitely something that we should be having hearings at the Texas legislative context about.
Yeah, and supporting reskilling people.
Yeah.
Because the thing that I find that often gets dismissed and ignored is there's a huge willingness from people to adapt and to be agile and to change, but they need the resources to do it. And we don't need to be trying to accomplish it all as individuals. We need to be doing it in a community effort.
Exactly. And I think the one thing is that obviously it's not necessarily only on entrepreneurs to think of the disruption that technology can bring. It's definitely much more so on policymakers, but I think both groups need to be partnering together to think this technology, like generative AI, can really have profound ramifications. And we need to be thinking together, how is the next iteration of what Texas economy is going to look like, and make sure it's one in which people aren't like, how can we make sure that AI results in a society that's working less, where there's more abundance, where there's more prosperity, and it's widely shared, right? Because I think everybody wants to live in Star Trek with replicators. I would love to do that. I don't want to live in a society where only some people have replicators. And I think the same for the benefits of AI. So
Love that. All right. So the third question that I wanted to bring up today, because hello, being a woman, that's a factor in its own, and the fact that I support a lot of women entrepreneurs, business owners, and CEOs and C-suite leaders. How do you see being able to bring back productive rights on a state level affects women in business?
yeah, it's so I'm the brother of an OBGYN, and when this decision, the Dobbs decision happened, like I remember just getting on the phone with her, because like in a very real way, like the hand of the state reached in between her and her patients, and it was just unacceptable. And so my wife and I want to have a kid in the next year, right? And it just gets really scary from like a health perspective. Like, what if something happens? Is the state going to interfere in whatever decisions that she needs to take? And just the heartbreaking stories that you're hearing across this state from an attorney general who's literally applying bans from the 1800s and then saying, well, this is what's in our constitution, not realizing that like constitution has changed, and that reproductive freedom is something that I wouldn't say every, but like the vast majority of Texans believe in, and that these decisions are unacceptable. So that's why I'm for citizen-led ballot initiatives, because I think we should be able to decide and say reproductive freedom should be on the ballot. To go more from the abstract into your question, I think that it profoundly affects women in business, because there's so many folks who don't want to relocate to Texas because of this, right? I was talking with some folks at Greentown Labs, and they're both male founders, and I was just saying like, okay, we want to have y'all here. They wanted to open up factories, but they're like, yeah, we're not going to do any of the white collar job management stuff in Texas or in Houston. I was like, what would it take for you to come to Houston? And they're like, our wives would never allow us, both because of LGBTQ stuff as well as reproductive freedom. And I think that there's a lot of good that's there in terms of how our state has been able to attract businesses, but our reproductive rights stance at a state government level is profoundly unjust, cruel to women, and also just profoundly crippling our ability to prosper as a state because of the fact that so many women and don't want to come to Texas if it's going to have these types of awful policies. And I think that if we are able to flip it, where we actually have policies where the state isn't just trying to persecute everyone and persecute women, while also being able to increase funding to have a stable grid, to increase funding to also have like workforce programs, like a better healthcare access, I think we'll just see so many more folks continuing to relocate at even higher levels, and we will become the largest economy of all the states in the United States and bypass California. And I think that decisions like the Dobbs verdict and the state government's like abysmal attack on women are really just holding back startups, entrepreneurship, and just women in general. And my very first visit as a candidate was on Planned Parenthood lobby day to say like this is wrong, and we need to do much better as a state. And I just really want to encourage people to vote in next year's elections and in the primaries, because I hope that if you're a listener on this podcast, reproductive rights are profoundly important to you. And the only way the state government is going to hear is if you make your voice heard at the ballot box to say that reproductive freedom is profoundly important and it should be in our Constitution and it should be guaranteed.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us as we're kind of rounding out our conversation that I haven't asked you?
Oh, this is the first time you got a politician on the thing and you're giving us the mic. That's I'd say that's always the wrong move. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I just really want to say that we're trying to create a movement across Texas for, what's the next iteration of what Texas can be. I'll be the first minority ever in this district, 70% majority minority district. I'd be one of the first startup founders ever in the Texas state legislature in the modern era. And I'd be one of the first in clean energy. And so sustainability is also important to me as well. And so if you're interested in learning more about our campaign, you can go to www.karthik4texas.com. If you're interested in cleaning up the legislature, putting in new ideas like ranked choice voting, citizen-led ballot initiatives, and also if you just have any ideas you'd like to propose, just because of the fact that the Texas state legislature could always use new ideas, we're open for anything, and we're on all forms of social media. So email them, and we'll try and incorporate them into our platform, because I think that democracy has to be about a dialogue between people. It can't just be people throwing down things on high, and it has to be part of a movement. And so we'd love to have you join our movement, and really appreciate the chance to be on this platform. And thank you so much for all that you all do. And especially you, Michelle, thank you so much for having us.
Well, thank you for coming and just giving us an opportunity to finally have a candidate that's willing to go out there and do something for the people, and is willing to do it in a way where it allows us to progress instead of feel like we're going backwards in time. So I totally appreciate that.
Oh, and there is one thing that I just realized that I didn't bring up, and it's pretty profound. So I've taken a vow not to, so it's legal currently in the state of Texas to be a legislator, and then to also but since it's a part-time legislature, people need to have income. And so what they do is they become lawyers for government connected firms, but really what they are is a lobbyist. And so it's a profound, I think, corruption of responsibility to both be a legislator and a lobbyist at the same time. So I am taking this vow that I'm not going to do that. And I want to go back as a teacher and teach in TSU, Rice, U of H, UHD, HCC, everywhere, wherever people will have me. And I really want to encourage all these listeners, because that's probably just like, what? That's legal in the state of Texas? Yes, it is. And I encourage you to hold your electeds accountable, or people that are seeking your vote, and to ask them, hey, are you going to take a vow to not be like a lobbyist while you're also serving the legislature? Because it just seems like a common sense thing across the far right to the far left that everybody from all these places can agree on. I want to encourage you to hold your legislator accountable.
Well, you definitely brought up something that I didn't think to ask, and is probably a pivotal question for a lot of people. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for tuning in to Startup Grind this month. We look forward to seeing what we might bring you in 2024. And you're always welcome to email me all those suggestions. So thank you, Karthik. I am looking forward to celebrating your win.
Thank you so much. And thanks for this opportunity. And there's nothing wrong with Texas that can't be cured by what's right with Texas, is what I always say.